I'm going to be talking about a recent traumatic experience that I had and how I handled it in the moment and in the aftermath on Mental Health Minute with Kim. Welcome to this special episode of Mental Health Minute with Kim. This week I'm going to be talking about a traumatic episode that happened to me on Thursday, February 14th, Valentine's Day of this year. This episode's going to be a little bit longer than what I usually post because I'm really going to go through the trauma narrative and tell you what happened and link it back to the series on trauma that I did recently because I'm going to relate it to the fight, flight, freeze, or faint response that is normal for us when we have a traumatic experience, and also making meaning out of traumatic experiences. I do want to give everybody a heads up that the narrative may be traumatic for some people, so viewer discretion is advised. Again, trauma is subjective, so what I may find traumatic, others may not, but I wanted to give you that kind of warning, viewer discretion is advised kind of thing. Now, on Valentine's Day, just to kind of give you some context, I had a stressful day at work. We have a tragedy response plan that we activate when there's been a death of a staff member or one of the youth that we serve. Now, typically my boss, my direct supervisor, activates the plan, but he was out sick on Valentine's Day, so it then fell to me, and I had to verify the death and then start informing staff of the death of the youth. So I was already under a lot of stress that day. I wasn't necessarily feeling anxious, but my stress hormones were kind of already activated. It's a very stressful thing. Now, I spent the rest of my workday notifying staff, working with youth as I usually do. Ended up staying about 10 minutes late. I'm off at midnight typically, and it was maybe about 12:10 a.m. when I headed home. And as I got into my hometown, I made a left-hand turn toward Main Street, and in front of me across the intersection I saw what looked like a car stalled on the railroad tracks. And I thought, well, that's weird, I wonder what's going on. And I saw a man standing next to the car. And as I approached the intersection and got closer, I realized that the car was wrapped around the telephone pole right next to the train tracks. So the front end was right on the telephone pole. I couldn't pull over or turn around right there. There was no room. So I went up the hill a little bit, came back down the hill, and pulled into a Dutch Brothers parking lot. Now, there was another gentleman, I'll call him the other helper. He also turned into the parking lot, and we both parked about 6 feet away from the train tracks. I could see that the driver of the car that had been wrecked was talking to the man in the truck, the other helper, as I pulled into the parking lot. And then as I pulled in, he came over to talk to me, the driver of the car did. I, for some reason, had this gut feeling that I should leave my car running, and I didn't question it. I just left my car running as I got out of the car, and the driver of the wrecked car asked if I had a phone charger. I told him I didn't have a phone charger and asked him if he was okay. And he said, yeah, I just need a phone charger. And I could smell alcohol on his breath as he was talking to me. So I asked if he had called for help, and he said no because his phone was dead. So I told him I was going to call for help. And he asked if I was calling 911, and I said of course I was. So once I finished talking with the dispatcher and was hanging up, the ambulance arrived, and I could see in my peripheral vision the lights of police cars who were also almost arriving on the scene. And it was about that time, I was standing over toward the ambulance. It was about that time that I heard the bells on the train arms go off and saw the lights go off and the arms come down across the track. Now, in a split second, I ran back to my car and yelled to the other helper who was still in his truck, we have to effing get out of here. I knew that if the train hit the car that was across the tracks, the car was going to go flying, or the train was going to derail, or something was going to happen, and we were right in the line of fire. So the other helper drove toward the opposite entrance. I followed closely behind. We were maybe 60 feet away from the train tracks, and I heard the train hit the car. In that instant, what I can tell you, and remember, this is my experience. Other people may have different experiences, but it seemed like things were going fast and slow at the same time, because I remember hearing the train hit the car behind me, gripping the steering wheel and waiting to die, but at the same time hoping we'd gotten far enough away. And it was mere seconds after I heard the train hit the car that I heard a second crash. And it was actually the car coming down in the parking spot that I had just evacuated. So it just happened, boom, boom, but it seemed like it took forever on one hand, and that it just went by so fast on the other hand. And that's how traumatic events can happen, or seem like to us. Anyway, I was sitting there gripping the wheel and realized that I was not dead, and I needed to let go of the wheel and figure out what was going on. So I used one of my tools, which I'll get to in a minute, and relaxed my grip on the wheel and pulled out and parked across the street so I could give the police my statement. The other helper took off right after the train hit, and I can't say as I blame him. That was a pretty scary thing. So, excuse me, I gave the police officer my statement, which I won't go into, and he asked me, I think he was trying to be helpful, but it was really the wrong thing to say to somebody in that moment. He asked, so you were parked right there, and pointed to where the wrecked car was sitting, and I said, yes sir, I was. And he said, well, you did a great job getting yourself and the other person out of there, because you'd be dead right now. And honestly, guys, I looked at him and I said, sir, I'm a mental health professional, and I'm using every tool I can access not to lose my shit right now. In retrospect, that isn't exactly the truth. We use the tools that we practice the most. And in that moment, when that train hit, and after I realized that I was still alive, there was only one tool I could access. And I'm going to share that with you now. And it's very simple. Relax body. When we get stressed out, our stress hormones like cortisol go high, and we tense our muscles. That's the first thing that happens. And honestly, if you tense your muscles right now, I can tell you when I do it, I get angry. It just releases those hormones. And if you relax your body, those stress hormones start to subside, and our relaxation hormones start to kick in. Neurotransmitters, all that stuff starts to kick in. So when I was gripping that steering wheel, the danger was actually over. It was the aftermath of the event. So I made myself relax in that moment, and I was able to keep a clear head for a while, park across the street, and give a statement and go home. Now, I can say when I got home and I was telling my parents about the event, I lost it. I was yelling. I was tense again. I apologized for yelling at them. My mom was crying, and I had to make myself relax again, because the traumatic time was over. This was now the aftermath. This is post-traumatic stress. And I don't say post-traumatic stress disorder, because it's natural to have post-traumatic stress in the moment and in the days and sometimes weeks following a traumatic event. PTSD doesn't develop until at least a month after the event. Now, I can say that after this happened, I still had to use that tool that I could access, and it really served me, because I told my dad the night that I got home and was telling them about it, that I was not going to go over the train tracks on my way to work the next day. I was going to go the back way so I could avoid them altogether. But what I realized was that that was an avoidance tactic that can add to the development of PTSD. We start avoiding places or things or events that remind us of the traumatic event. So I made myself go over the train tracks the next day, and I did it in a relaxed body, and I was able to make it through without any anxiety. The real test, though, came a week later when I was going home and got to the train tracks again, and there was a train going across. And I pulled up to the intersection facing the tracks, and I could see two cars parked, or this side, stopped this side of the train tracks. And I thought to myself, there's plenty of room for me to get behind those cars, or I can just stay on this side of the intersection. And again, I recognized that I would be avoiding a situation if I didn't get up behind those cars. So I relaxed my body, and it took a lot of work this time, and I pulled up behind those cars, and I listened to those bells and watched those lights and watched the train go by, and I was okay. I was a little shaky, but I was okay for the most part. We have tools that we can use, but in the moment, our brain uses the tools that are most easily accessible, and those tend to be the ones that we practice the most. We can have a shit ton of tools to use, and I do have a shit ton of tools to use as a therapist, but I was only able to access one, and it really helped me make it through the aftermath of this traumatic experience. And one of the first things that I thought after the experience is, my work here isn't finished. I sought supervision. I went and saw a therapist who I like very much, and I trust her, and we had a really good talk, and we talked about making meaning from the event. And one of the biggest things about the meaning of the event that I can share with you, my experience, again, everybody's is different, is that I firmly believe that if I still had panic disorder, which I freely talk about having had in the past, if I still had panic disorder, I think that things may have turned out very differently and probably fatally, because I would have been in such a heightened state of anxiety all the time that my fight or flight response might not have acted right. I may not have been able to react at all. I may have frozen or fainted. And my fight or flight response in that moment is actually working how it was supposed to be. That was a true life-threatening situation that my brain perceived, and it helped me to react and get the hell out of there. Now, when I was sitting with my hands gripped on the wheel, I was kind of in a frozen state, and that's when I had to relax my body. So learn a lot of tools to help you get through anxiety or panic and help keep your fight or flight response tuned up like it should be. Another thing that I took from this is that next week on the 21st, I'm going to our state capitol to participate in a day of ethics workshops and also to talk to legislators about mental health. Now, I was having a little anxiety about going to talk to them, and now it's really been put into perspective for me. I tell people, you know what? I took on a train and lived. I think I can talk to some people, because almost being killed by a train or a flying car, whatever, is a life-threatening situation. Talking to people is not. It doesn't matter if they're lawmakers or anything like that. They're talking to us because we're the experts in our fields and want to know what we have to say about the state of mental health and things pertaining to it. I can talk to people about that. I lived through this traumatic experience. I can talk to people about mental health. No sweat. Also, my 9-year-old nephew, who is very sweet, heard about the event from my dad, and he's very into Minecraft, and he came up to me, and it was maybe 2 days after the event, and he said, "Papa told me what happened, and I want you to have this." And he held out his hands. His hand was clutched. And he put something in my hand, and it was a little figurine, a little Minecraft figurine. And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "It's a totem of undying. It will bring you protection and luck. It's from Minecraft, and I want you to have it." This little guy imbued his love and his protective instincts into this little figurine, and I carry it with me just to remind myself of what's important and to keep going on and to keep helping people. One last thing I took from it is that I'm really effing angry at the driver of the car. because he was cited for driving under the influence, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath. And he put two people who stopped to help him in danger, and then tried to tell the police that he was not driving the car, even though there was nobody else in or around the car. And I was angry for that. But my therapist reminded me that when I got home, my mom's reaction was validation, that somebody was hearing the truth and validating that this had actually happened. And my nephew even giving me the little figurine that he had given me was validation. So I hope that the gentleman, I am still angry, I'm not going to lie, but the anger gets less and less each day. And I hope this was a wake-up call for him. I really do. And also, if somebody is in distress, will I stop again? Yeah. But I might not park so close. I might park a little bit farther away. And I'm going to keep using my tools and using other tools other than just the relaxed body, so that if anything like that comes up again, my brain will have plenty of tools to choose from to help me get through that traumatic event. That's it for this week. I hope you all have a good week. Love each other, take care of each other, remember what's important, keep things in perspective, use your tools, and live your life. I'll see you next week.